Today we're going over some of the practice questions for the NCE, CPCE, CECE, and NCMHCE. And these questions might help you out on other counseling exams as well. The practice questions today are from the category of testing and assessment. Going over these practice questions will of course help test your knowledge related to testing and assessment. Not only that though, as we go over them, you may learn more about other topics, as well as learning ways to navigate these tests and answer these questions when you're not confident you know the answer to the question. So make sure you stick around for all of the questions so that you don't miss any testing tips. But first, my name is Keegan. I have a master's degree in counseling and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I make videos like this to help you better understand various concepts in the world of psychology, counseling, and mental health. Keep in mind that engaging with this channel does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes. This does not substitute or replace professional mental health care. Here's how this will work. I'll read the question and the possible answers. I'll give you a moment to pause and finalize your answer if needed. Then we'll talk about the correct answer, what makes it correct, as well as the incorrect answers, and what about them makes them not the best answer for that question. This way, you're getting a good steady habit going of learning more about the correct answer, but also learning more about the other answers as well so that you're expanding your knowledge in those areas. Here's the first question. Appraisal can include which of the following? A. Observations. B. Surveys. C. Clinical interviews. D. All of the above. The correct answer here is D. All of the above. This is kind of a tricky question because it's asking about appraisal, which is a term that has a variety of different ways that it's used. In this question, observations, surveys, and interviews are all forms of appraisal. And this is because the term is being used broadly to mean a way of collecting information about something. Often you'll see the term appraisal used when it comes to testing. When you think about it, testing also fits with the way that we're using appraisal in this question, as testing is another way of collecting information. Let's move on to the second question. The difficulty index of a test tells us what? A. The level of education that is needed for a person to take a test. B. The average reading level of all questions on a test. C. The percentage of people who answer each item on a test correct. D. All of the above. For this question, the correct answer is C. In assessments, a difficulty index is looking at the percentage of people who answer a question correctly. The more people that get an answer correct, the lower the difficulty index. The fewer people that get the answer correct, the higher the difficulty index. You may also hear a difficulty index called a difficulty value. Response A is about the education level needed for a test. When it comes to the education level that is needed for a test, logically it would make sense that the education level needed for a test is going to match the education level where the test is being given. For example, it doesn't make sense to give a high school student in a psychology class a test that is intended for a graduate student that is getting their PhD. However, keep in mind that this is a very complicated thing, as there are things like placement tests that are to determine an advanced placement course. There are also things like standardized tests that are often written at a specific education level. All that to say, it's complicated, and this response alone could probably have a video or videos about it. For response B, this is about reading level. I don't have any information to back this up, but it seems logical that the reading level of a test is going to match the level where it's being given. So again, as an example, it would make sense that a test for a high school student is not going to be written at a reading level that we'd expect for a graduate student. I can also see where it would make sense that the reading level of a test is actually going to be lower than where the test is being given. So a graduate level test may be written at a reading level that is actually below the graduate level so that we know the reading level is not getting in the way of the actual content. That said, something else we could consider with this response is that there are things like standardized tests for reading where the reading level of the assessment items may vary throughout the test as that's part of what they're assessing. So like response A, this is an answer that is very complicated and that could probably get a video or videos for this topic alone as well. Let's move on to the next question. If a test has dichotomous options, what format would we expect this test to be? A. True, false. B. Multiple choice. C. Subjective. D. None of the above. For this question, the correct answer is A. In this context, dichotomy means that there are two options and that the options are opposing. That means that true, false, or option A best fits this description. In this question, multiple choice cannot be the correct answer as this implies that there are multiple options available to the person taking the test. Option C is referring to a subjective test. This is where the person grading the test or the question has subjectivity to how they're grading that response. Therefore, the person grading the response has an influence over how they're grading it and whether they're considering it correct or incorrect, or to what level they are considering it to be a good answer. One way to determine if a question is a subjective question or if a test is a subjective test is whether or not it can be graded by a computer. Of course, this is a little bit more complicated now with artificial intelligence or AI, as that might help with some of that. But broadly, subjective questions or subjective tests could not be graded by a computer. It would need a human to do it. When it comes to dichotomous questions and multiple choice questions, both of these lack subjectivity, as these could be graded by a computer, and there's a limited number of options that are given as to how the question can be answered. An essay question would be something that would be considered subjective, as the person grading that would have influence over how it's being graded. Let's move on to the fourth question. We develop a systematic method to measure a behavior. We have developed a what? A, treatment, B, questionnaire, C, test, D, theory. For this question, the correct answer is C. If we've developed something that measures a specific behavior, we have then developed a test, as this is one of the definitions for what a test is. With response A, treatment is given as an option. Broadly speaking, a treatment is something that helps a person overcome something that they're dealing with. Therapy is a form of treatment to overcome a psychological difficulty. An antibiotic is a form of treatment to overcome an infection, and so on. So these are things that are treatment options, as they're to help the person overcome something they're struggling with, or that's creating difficulty for that person. Option B is a questionnaire. This could potentially be an option for an answer, since questionnaires can be used to gather information about behavior. However, reading through this question, they're asking about a systematic method of measuring. When I think of questionnaires, systematic is not one of the first things that comes to my mind. I think they could be used in a systematic way, so it's not to say that a questionnaire could not be that. It's just not one of the first things that comes to my mind. Therefore, this makes questionnaire not one of the best answers, especially when we see test being an option, and then this question asking about one of the definitions of what a test is. That makes test the better option. With response D, we get the option of a theory. When I think about theories, I think about how they are a framework for understanding or thinking about something. Therefore, a theory might give us a way of thinking about a behavior, or a way of thinking about or understanding why a person is engaging in a specific behavior. However, theories do not give us a way to measure a specific behavior. How are you doing so far? We have one more question to go. But first, if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please help me out by giving it a like and subscribing. The fifth and final question is, another name for a free choice test format is A, free response, B, multiple choice, C, culture-free response, D, precise response. With our fifth question here, the correct answer is A. With a free choice or free response format, the test taker can respond in any way that they feel is best. An essay question would be an example of this type of a test question. Option B is multiple choice. Multiple choice is not free response or free choice. Instead, multiple choice is a forced choice. A possible way to think about this that might help you remember them is that an essay question is a free response or free choice, because the person has the freedom to respond to that essay question in any way that feels appropriate for them and allows them to answer the question the way that they understand it. With multiple choice, a person is limited to the options that are given. They are forced to pick one of those. Therefore, multiple choice is a forced choice response. As for options C and D with this question, these are terms that I made up based on other terms that we commonly use related to assessment or in counseling generally. So if you saw those terms and were not familiar with them, don't beat yourself up. I just kind of made them up for this one. And if you saw them and thought that they could be a correct answer, don't worry about it too much. They were chosen and written to be tricky. This brings us to the end of our practice questions today. How'd you do on them? Let me know in the comments. I hope that you found this video helpful. While you're here, check out some of the other videos on my channel. Thank you so much for watching.